To get people excited about Boost Mobile's new nationwide 5G network, we're offering unlimited talk, text, and data for $25 a month.
Forever.
Even if you have a baby.
Even if your baby has a baby.
Even if you grow old and wrinkly and you start repeating yourself.
Even if you start repeating yourself.
Even if you're on your deathbed and you need to make one last call.
Or text.
Right, or text the long-lost son you abandoned at birth.
You'll still get unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month with Boost Mobile.
Forever!
After 30 gigabytes, customers may experience slower speeds. Customers will pay $25 a month as long as they remain active on the Boost Unlimited plan.
Forever!
No one knows better than HR that happy colleagues make happy businesses. With the world's largest online mental health provider, you get access to over 35,000 therapists, a match in as little as 24 hours, and that's not all. We onboard your people in days, not months, with no upfront fees and pay-as-you-go pricing. Now that's better. BetterHelp Business. Now get back to business with that podcast of yours.
Welcome to day number 29 of 31 Days of Terror, and today I have one story for you, and it comes from the 23rd of September 2024, and our story comes from Kim. And Kim is the host of a podcast called A Good Night for a Murder, which is a Victorian true crime podcast. So A Good Night for a Murder is a podcast that covers true crime of the Victorian era from all over the world. New episodes are released every month and cover notorious cases like Jack the Ripper and Lizzie Borden, to lesser known but equally fascinating cases like chocolate cream poisoner Christiana Edmonds, missing socialite Dorothy Arnold, spirit photographer and scam artist William Mumler, and so many more. So if that sounds like it's up your street, please do go and listen to A Good Night for a Murder. I'll leave the link to the website in the description of this episode. So let's get into Kim's story. When I was in high school, I woke up before everyone else in my house to take a shower in the morning. It was getting to be winter, and it was still dark out when I was getting out of the shower. I turned off the bathroom lights so as not to wake my parents, whose bedroom was across from the bathroom. Then I opened the door to head back to my room. Across the hallway in my parents' room, standing next to their bed, I saw a tall, white outline of a man. It was kind of like a shadow, if a shadow could be translucent white instead of dark. There were no distinguishing characteristics about it. It was just a silhouette of a tall man with broad shoulders. I didn't feel afraid. I actually stopped and stared at this thing for a few seconds. Then I thought to myself, I must be tired and needed to start getting to bed earlier, and I went to my room to get dressed. An hour or so later, my family had woken up and I was sitting in my parents' room on their bed, talking to my mom while she got ready for the day. I said to her, I'm going to go to bed earlier tonight because when I looked in here this morning, I thought I saw someone standing next to the bed. She stopped what she was doing and pointed to the exact spot on the floor next to the bed where I had seen the strange silhouette of a man standing, and said, Do you mean right here? I said yes. And she said, I look up and see him standing there all the time. While I was growing up, we often attributed anything unusual that went on to my mom's dad, my grandfather, who I never met, who was the only person that had lived and died in our house. We agreed that that was likely who we were seeing. My second apparition sighting was when I was in my early 20s and I was working a fully remote office job. But we would all get together at my boss's house occasionally to meet in person. My boss lived in an old 1800s stone farmhouse. There were also old servants' quarters, a carriage house, stables and other outbuildings. It was grand. During one of these meetings, about 8 of us were seated along both sides of a narrow table in the kitchen with my boss at the head. Behind her was a mudroom entrance to the house. We were on a conference call with another department when I noticed someone standing in the mudroom. It was dark in there, so I couldn't make out who it was. but I knew all of my co-workers were seated there around the table. Also, she had 3 noisy dogs that never got used to us being there and would make a huge racket anytime someone so much as stood up. So I figured this must be someone the dogs know. It must be my boss's husband coming home. But we had seen him leave for the city about an hour ago. And also her husband was a big man. And this looked like a small, stooped, grandpa-sized man. They looked to have a newsboy cap on and had their hands shoved into their jacket pockets. I wondered if it could be a neighbour who just saw the cars in the driveway and thought they'd pop in. So I purposefully directed my gaze behind my boss and leaned back a bit to indicate I was trying to look at something behind her, hoping she'd notice and turn around. But she was engrossed in the conference call and didn't notice me. So I glanced around at my co-workers to try and catch their attention, hoping one of them would speak up about the person standing in the mudroom. But none of them seemed to notice anything amiss either. It was at that point that I realised they must not be seeing what I was seeing. When I looked back to the mudroom, it was empty. I kept this to myself and simply went about the day. A month later, we were back at my boss's place for another day of in-person meetings. During lunch, my boss was telling us the history of the property, and one of my co-workers asked, "Do you have any ghosts?" My boss shrugged and said, "Nah, I don't think so. We've never had any funny bumps in the night or anything like that." She could tell her response was a bit disappointing to all of us hoping for a ghost story. So she offered up that one time when she was seeing friends out through the mudroom, one of her friends, who was very spiritual, interrupted her speaking and told her not to move because there was a spirit of a grumpy old man standing right behind her, which is exactly what I had seen standing in the exact same place. I still never revealed what I had seen, but I did appreciate the validation. The third apparition I saw was when I was sitting on the floor of the bathroom while my son played in the tub. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone step into the doorway of the bathroom. It was the move that you would make if your kids are playing quietly in the next room and you just want to peek in without disturbing them. I saw a skirt swish into the doorframe, and I would describe it as a 1940s day dress, and it immediately felt like mom energy. You know how you jump when you're startled? That happens because your body is reacting to something faster than your conscious thoughts can process. In this instance, when I saw and sensed a woman coming into the bathroom, I turned and smiled at her. A second later, my brain caught up with my actions and I realised my son and I were 100% alone in the house. And also, no one was standing in the doorway. My son continued splashing away in the tub. But for me, the fact that I reacted that way confirms for me that I did indeed see something. I subscribe to the belief that we can have guides or support from the other side during different phases of life. We'd been through tumultuous times recently and had not been living in this house for that long. So I'm unsure if this spirit belonged with me, my son, or the house, but either way, she was there. Since moving into the house, I have what I affectionately call a breakfast ghost, and I suspect it could be the same spirit. At random times, I will smell breakfast cooking, usually late at night, when there is zero cooking happening in the house, even on days I haven't cooked at all. Houses here are on plenty of land, so it's not wafting over from the neighbour, and it's happened with the house completely shuttered as well. It usually smells like French toast, and sometimes bacon, which is especially interesting because I'm a vegetarian and haven't cooked bacon in over 10 years, and certainly never made it in this house. Even though I've had experiences in many places, I think my first apartment in particular was haunted. It was the second story of a house, and it was my first time living alone. At first, I did not want to sleep in the bedroom. In hindsight, this should have been my first clue. I liked that apartment. I was excited to have my own place. I did not feel particularly apprehensive about living alone. But something about that back bedroom made me not want to sleep in there. So for the first 2 weeks or so, I slept on the couch in the living room. Eventually, I started sleeping in the bedroom though. I sensed there might be something in the apartment that was getting used to me. More than once when I was laying in bed reading before going to sleep, my music box on the dresser across the room would let out just 3 or so slow notes. It was the kind of music box that played when you lifted the lid, and the whole house would be absolutely still when it happened. I could hear my neighbour coming and going downstairs, and the music box notes didn't coincide with them slamming any doors or anything. When this happened, I would take notice of it, then ignore it. One time I was coming home after dark with a bunch of grocery bags and struggling to get up the stairs and inside my apartment in the dark. I dumped a bunch of grocery bags on the floor, and when I turned back, my hallway lamp had been turned on. I didn't turn it on. It turned itself on. It felt like whatever was there was growing fond of me. One night I was again laying in bed. I happened to be reading the Harry Potter series, and I was at the part where Harry and Ron are in the haunted forest trying to escape from the giant spiders Hagrid kept there. It was very suspenseful and I was very into it. Then suddenly a spider ran over my shoulder and down my upper arm. I flew out of bed, threw my book, tore my covers off, and it just felt like something was laughing at me, like it had been a practical joke. It very much felt like a prank an older brother would play. I felt like it was time to leave that apartment before anything got more attached, and I did move out after only 1 year of living there. So, as far as I know, no pranksters came with me. These last 2 experiences are the only 2 experiences that I have had that I found scary. Several years ago after work, I stopped by a supermarket to pick up something from the grab-and-go market for dinner. I parked facing the store, and in the spot diagonal to my right facing me was an old beat-up pickup truck, with the bed piled dangerously high with garbage and junk. The second I set foot outside my car, a voice popped into my head and said, "Don't walk past the truck." I thought this was weird, but I listened, and I actually walked around the back of my car and then along my passenger side and headed into the store. I was walking around the market picking what I wanted for dinner when I heard someone call my name. I looked around and didn't see anyone, so I went back to what I was doing. Then I heard my name again. I looked around and again didn't see anyone. Then I heard my name a third time, and I realised there were 2 young men laughing and snickering at me. I had no idea who they were, but they had clearly read my name off of my name tag from work that I had forgotten to take off, and decided that they were going to mess with me. I was unfortunately already headed in their direction towards the register when I realised this, and as I passed them, I swore really nastily at both of them and kept walking. I was feeling shaky and upset now. I was upset that I'd let them get to me. Also, even though this was a crowded supermarket, I'd done the one thing girls are taught not to do, which is never do anything that could put you in a bad situation. I was quickly able to pay for my food and then leave. As I was headed back to my car, I remembered I wasn't supposed to walk past the pickup truck, so again I walked along my passenger side and around the back of my car to get to the driver's side. As soon as I got in my car, I saw seated in the front seat of the pickup truck was one of the creepy guys who'd been taunting me in the market. I left quickly, checking my mirrors the entire time. They didn't try to follow me or anything, but I can't help but feel something different would have happened if I didn't have that premonition to keep away from that truck. This last story is the only one that scared me and still scares me to this day. It happened when I was probably 9 or 10, and I would go over to my friend's house down the street to play. The day started out normally enough. My friend and I were playing all over the house and the yard. They also had a big German Shepherd mixed dog named Dusty that was always following us around as we played. After a while, I started to get this weird creeping feeling like I didn't want to be there anymore. There was no reason for it. We were having fun, the sun was shining, and the birds were singing. But I started to get this pervasive feeling of anxiety that something bad was about to happen. I tried to ignore it, but after a while I couldn't anymore, and finally asked my friend if she could feel it too. She said she did, But I'm not so sure, as she just went back to playing. For a while, we turned it into a sort of detective game, sneaking around the house to see if something off was happening in any of the rooms. But the feeling had only grown for me and I wasn't having fun. Eventually we realised her dog Dusty had not been following us for some time now, so we went to find her. We found her, laying out on her side in the backyard, not moving. We called to her, but she still didn't move. My friend approached her and touched her shoulder, and when she still didn't move, we knew that something was very, very wrong. My friend screamed, which brought her parents running into the yard, and they told both of us to run down the street to my house, which is the exact thing I'd been wanting to do for the past hour. We took off, and as we feared, Dusty the dog had died unexpectedly in the yard while we played around in the house. That was the event I had felt coming. I'd felt death coming. And that is the scariest thing to me. I'm still afraid I'll feel it again to this day, though since then I've learned to be less open to sensing those types of things. Okay, let's go right back to the beginning. First of all, I love how level-headed you were, you know? You see this tall, translucent, kind of white silhouette of a man standing over your mum, watching her while she's sleeping, right? Again, less of that. We've been down that road. Stop watching people while they sleep, etc. And instead of freaking out, you're like, okay, I need to go to bed earlier. Like, I'm obviously tired. And I wonder if a part of that lack of freaking out was due to the aura, the energy that this entity, this man was giving off. And I wonder, like, when your mom was like, I look up and see him standing there all the time, you know, you're both validating each other's experiences. Did you feel fear then? Or were you just like, how weird? It was definitely Grandad. Which is very lovely and very comforting, and must have felt good to be able to go, okay, this weird thing has happened, but we know that it's nothing sinister or malevolent. And as for the next story, right? Work is hard enough. Being in work and being in meetings and being in conferences is hard enough without seeing ghosts at the same time. And you are a better person than I, because first of all, I would have interrupted the conference for everybody. I would have been like, excuse me, there's somebody in your mudroom. Your neighbours just called in, just wanted to let you know. And secondly, when your boss was like, oh, you know, my spiritual friend sensed that there was an old man in the mudroom, I would have been like, knew it. I saw that guy. Don't worry about it. I can see ghosts. I'm like the kid from The Sixth Sense. Everybody, I'm a spooky gal. Nobody freak out. But you obviously have some sort of ability to be able to see these things. And again, you obviously have the ability to be able to tell from the energy of this thing whether it means you harm or whether it is a positive entity. Like, I love that you turned and smiled at the woman who was looking around the doorway, and then you were like, oh shit, actually that woman wasn't real, that was a ghost. But like you said, your body, your psyche obviously responded and went, oh no, this is fine, this is positive, she's only just, you know, checking in on us. And maybe you're right. Maybe everybody has guardian spirits at various times in their life, and you just have the ability to be able to see these things or be able to sense these things in a positive way. And, you know, in that apartment that you lived in, like, it feels like whatever was in there ended up enjoying you being there or enjoying your company, you know, helping you out, turning the hallway lamp on. I mean, the spider less so. But you can see how, like, an older brother energy would find that funny. And I feel like your intuition, your ability to read the situation around you is obviously really strong. Like, this voice in your head that was like, don't walk past that truck. And then the rage I feel about the men in the grocery store, like, purposefully trying to upset you, purposefully trying to make you feel uncomfortable. And honestly, the rage I felt at the line, never do anything that could put you in a bad situation. Like, that is obviously, that's rules to live by, right? Don't do shit that puts you in a bad situation. However, in this instance, and in a lot of instances for women and girls, and particularly in this incident, maybe those men just shouldn't have been trying to make you feel uncomfortable and trying to call out your name and reading your name tag, purposefully trying to mess with you because they thought it was funny to make you feel uncomfortable, thought it was funny to make you feel anxious and nervous in a public space. I'm not going to go on a feminist tirade. Much and all as I would like to, I'm not going to do it. But thank goodness for your intuition being like, don't walk around that truck. Stay away from that truck. Obviously, something inside you knew that it was dangerous. And it feels like that intuition was also there when the dog, Dusty, passed away in the backyard. Like, it feels like you have this intuition for bad things happening. And that your body, your psyche is like, get out of this situation because something bad is about to happen. Which in itself, I mean, what a superpower to have. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Remember, Kim has a podcast that is called A Good Night for a Murder, which is all about Victorian era true crime, from the really famous stories to the lesser known stories. So please go and check out A Good Night for a Murder. The link is in the description of this episode. Kim's story came from the 23rd of September 2024, but remember, wait until day 31 to figure out what date I've actually finished on. Thank you so much for listening, and if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com, and if you are desperate for some extra spooky content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you get access to heaps of extra content, as well as every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.
The new Boost Mobile network is offering unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month for life.
That sounds like a threat.
Then how do you think we should say it?
Unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month for the rest of your life?
I don't know.
Until your ultimate demise.
What if we just say forever?
Okay.
$25 a month, forever.
Get unlimited talk, text, and data for just $25 a month with Boost Mobile forever.
After 30 gigabytes, customers may experience slower speeds. Customers will pay $25 a month as long as they remain active on the Boost Unlimited plan.